to the next topic, Tom, and this is again, unfortunately, we're going back to conservative journalists, conservative politicians, etc. But this is one that stood out particularly because of on top of what we've seen this weekend, the absolute hypocrisy. Now, Sarah Vine, for those people who don't know, is the wife of Michael Gove. They have just announced last week that they're separated, getting divorced, that they're still really, really good friends, but they've drifted apart. That was preceded, actually, interestingly, by a tweet by Diane Abbott some weeks ago when Sarah Vine, she works at the Daily Mail, folks, and she is vile. She really is. All she ever wants to do is attack other people for her particular piece each day, or how often she publishes. She gets paid, obviously far more money than the average income for most people in this country for writing scurrilous nonsense. And yet, as a direct result of this being announced, they asked for privacy. Now, I felt, Tom, I'm sorry, but I felt that for someone like her to be asking for privacy, given what she does. Now, what I want to do is just show a piece when she appeared on I think it was the Andrew Neil show or whatever it was, back when David Miliband, when his brother, what's his name? Sorry,
Ed
Miliband. Yeah, back when Ed Miliband was leader of the Labour Party. Now, this is what she had to say when she was challenged on the nature and the content of her article. And I think then only a few people will be still left understanding why we're particularly frustrated, shall we say, at this point.
In her article about Mrs. Miliband, compared her to an alien, compared her to Mr. Spock, and said that a government under Ed Miliband would bring a Stalin-esque situation. I mean, that was pretty tough talk. Well, particularly from someone who's in a position to know how vulnerable you are as a political wife.
It's interesting because when I started out on this process, I was, well, not exactly a sensitive flower, but I was certainly a much more, probably a much nicer person than I am now. You just get tough. You have to get tough, otherwise you just can't survive it. And,
but there's something else going on, which is the corrupting influence of newspapers. Newspapers want you to write that sort of vile stuff. I mean, that lady has done nothing wrong in life except that she happens to be married to the leader of the opposition. To compare her to an alien or Mr. Spock, in my view, is not justified.
Well, the piece was actually about the kitchen.
No.
As a matter of fact.
Well, yeah, and it was pretty bitchy about the kitchen.
It was very bitchy about the kitchen. And if you read...
It turns out not to be the proper kitchen.
No, in fact, there are, in fact, two kitchens. But the point is that I'm a journalist. I write that kind of stuff. I've written that kind of stuff for the last 20 years.
Yes, but it's not nice.
And that sort of stuff, but that doesn't... Newspapers aren't meant to be nice. They're meant to be informative.
But this whole business about whether, we're going to get decent people to go into politics, when they know that not only they are going to be traduced, but their wives are going to be traduced, their children are going to be traduced.
But the moment you put your head above the parapet, you get shot down, and that's what's happened to all of us. We all have it. Samantha Cameron has it all the time.
But why doesn't someone stand up? Why doesn't a journalist stand up and say, "I'm not going to write this stuff"? I'm sorry, it's just not fair. This woman happens to be married to the
I see what you mean about the word hypocrisy, Jace.
Yeah. They want her to respect her privacy, having just admitted that.
Yeah. Something that really struck me, seeing it is she tried to justify her hateful article, her hateful and abusive article, by saying, that articles are not meant to be nice; they're meant to be informative. Well, her piece wasn't informative. It was a hit job. It was a hateful article on Ed Miliband's wife, calling her an alien, comparing her to Mr. Spock. That's not informative. That's not informative.
No, exactly.
And it's not journalism. She described herself as a journalism. She's not a proper journalist. She's someone that writes hateful articles with a political purpose to them.
She's a hate entrepreneur, Tom.
a hate entrepreneur, indeed. How different is she from the other types of hate entrepreneur that we've discussed in previous episodes? Yeah, making a lucrative living from spreading hate. So yeah, I mean, it was fair criticism of her, and certainly for her now to be, asking for privacy is is substantially hypocritical.
Yes, and I don't think anything more needs to be said, to be fair. I think the readers can make up their own mind. But I think it goes back to the previous conversations we had. Those with high levels of empathy will look at that and think it's outrageous, and people with low levels of empathy will say, what's the problem?
They'll say fair game.
Fair
if you're
game.
in the public eye, it's fair game.
Yeah.
If you're a politician, if you're a footballer, it's fair game for anyone in the media or the public to abuse you in a disgusting, inhuman way. That's part of a political philosophy these days, which is truly appalling and doesn't do anything good for our society.
And it might well be that the people who get into these positions of power and responsibility and are given the opportunity to write this garbage, that, as Clive Stafford Smith said a few weeks back, they probably all went to public school, and they're probably all beaten and sexually abused, and they don't really know any different, and any compassion that they had in them was all, plundered out of them. So, we're not saying it's their fault. We're just saying that we have to have radical systemic change within our society to reduce the opportunities for people like this, in terms of the way in which they turn out, to be, if not zero, as close to it as possible.
Yeah.
And us abusing them won't change them. Us pointing out the fact that they have no empathy and, they're racist, homophobic, and often vile, they ain't going to change because we pointed out. They'll change, or their children, or their children's children, etc., etc. We need to give them the opportunity not to be like them. That is the key. That is the success story. It's a long-term project, but that's the success story.
Yeah.